Welcome. My name is Jack Carroll. I'm a faculty member in IST, and I'm introducing the talk today. And it's a pleasure to do so. Judith Olson is the leader in computing and information sciences, and also one of my dearest compadres, which means a friend and a fellow traveler.
Yes.
And we've been traveling for a while, but who's counting the years as they go by?
Too many big numbers.
Yeah. She is currently the Donald Bren Professor Emerita of Information and Computer Sciences at the University of California, Irvine. And she has a lot of other things, of course, but just a few of those. She's one of the founders of the HCI area that many of you have encountered or will. She also was a professor of business and of psychology at the University of Michigan, and for 3 years a manager in AT&T Bell Labs. In 1996, she was one of the founding leaders of the School of Information, which our school was seriously influenced by at the earliest point. She's also a winner of the ACM Chi Lifetime Achievement Award. She's an ACM Fellow and also won the ACM Athena Lecture Award. She's a founder of the CSCW area and has contributed over the decades to understanding how distance matters in human activity, and she'll be talking about that today.
Yes, thank you very much. So, thank you, Jack and Mary Beth, for having us here. Can you hear me in the back row? Oh, fabulous. Okay, because distance matters, you know, you're way back there. All right, so we have been doing work for a number of years on long-distance collaboration. And more recently, because a student in the School of Education found me, she said, I have to do distance work, but it has to do with a very different population. It has to do with children, and they're going to school on a robot. Can you help me? It's a perfect project, especially if you're about to retire, because you can focus on this and not much else. And that's what we've been doing. So let me show you who Veronica is. This is Veronica. She's a more mature PhD student. She has been a manager in health informatics in Montana for a number of years. And here's a place where she is outreaching about this project to the Japanese public broadcasting network. So she inspired an hour's program there. She had a 30-second face. This is her face in that show. But she's very good at outreach. This is proving that there was a camera crew. This all was legitimate, just not her sitting at a desk. But she's also been in the news a number of times because of this project, one of which was to have the senior class gift at UCI. The seniors contribute money to give something to the school, and she convinced them to buy robots for the students, the university students who are ill or can't get into school because of mobility problems to go to school. They would go to school on a robot as well. But we're mainly looking at children. And let me show you these statistics. Back of the envelope. We're looking at children with chronic illnesses who have the cognitive capability to go to school, but not the mobility. Or they are children who have acute immune deficiency, and so they can't be with other children. Those of you who know about children in school, they all have runny noses and they're coughing, and they exchange diseases all the time. So if you go to school, you're going to get a runny nose. A child with immune deficiency going to school would die. Right? They cannot fight that kind of disease. Somebody with leukemia, a child about to get a heart transplant also has to be careful about what diseases they have at that time, so their immune system can function appropriately. So our estimates that there is 4.5 million of these children in the US alone. That's a huge number. Some have chronic illness, some have temporary physical restrictions, but the standard practice in most states is to give them 4 to 5 hours of tutoring a week. 4 to 5 hours where an adult will come to the house, he'll go through the books, give them some homework, a box of things to do during the week, what does that child do the other 35 hours a week? Well, they're not motivated very much to go through the box of stuff or to read because they're used to doing that stuff in school where there are other kids around them doing the same thing. And they go, oh, am I supposed to be doing that worksheet? Okay, now I'll do that worksheet. So there's what's called social facilitation when you do things with other people. And that's missing entirely in this setting. It's a box of books and worksheets, and they also get an individualized educational plan, an IEP, which is something worked out by the teacher and the school system about what can this child keep up with. And because they know it's 45 hours a week of personal interaction. So it's not forgetting everything, it's a much reduced set of things that their goals are. So there have been attempts. How many times is this going to happen during the talk? This is human-computer interaction, right? All right, there's that. It takes me back to where I am. I don't understand. All right, so children who are getting this tutoring, and sometimes they miss their friends enormously. So what they do is supplement it with doing some stuff on Facebook. But as you know, if you're just Facebook and not with each other day by day, the whole friendship thing is going to peter off because they don't see you so much. They see you only on Facebook, whereas they see all their other friends daily and then supplement it with Facebook. Another solution that some teachers have come with is why don't we just put them on an online school? So they'll get all kinds of the education, all these tutorials and things like that. How many of you have been on an online educational program? How many of you stuck through to the end? Well, some, okay, good. All right, they are very good academically, right? But they don't do anything about the child's need for social interaction. So, other people have tried video conferencing in schools. So I love the one on the right. So the teacher is doing story time, and the child is on the little laptop with a little camera. Can you see that in there? All right, and on the left, there's an older child raising her hand because she wants to answer a question with the teacher. So this can work, but what's the problem with this one? Somebody has to carry them from activity to activity or from class to class. And they actually incur a social burden. All right, somebody has to be that person, and they don't have the autonomy of just moving around. There has been an experimental system called Pebbles. It's actually a really long sentence that I can never remember, but Pebbles is its nickname, which is that device. You can see the two views of it. A unique thing about it was its head moved separate from the body, and so as the child moved around to look at things, the head moved, all right, as opposed to just the camera. The body was on wheels, but it too had to be moved around from class to class or activity to activity. So there's no way for the child to actually move around. Now, there are other solutions that have come out in the adult world, not the child world. One early one was worked by Gina Vanolia and others at Microsoft Research called the Embodied Social Proxy. So this was video conference. It's the person on the far left in the monitor. That's actually George Robertson. And John Tong is on his right, but George is in the box. They actually called him George in the box. He has a camera at the top. He's on a cart with wheels, and he would go from meeting to meetings. He was actually resident in Maine, and he would telecommute to Microsoft in this particular way. You see on the right-hand side two views that he wanted. These are all accumulating now about what do we really want this robot to have. He wanted to be able to see the people for conversation, which was the one on the left. And then he had to be aware of what's going on in the room, so he wanted a much bigger view. So in case somebody came in behind him or near him, he'd be aware, just like you and I would in a real room. But he too had to be moved from place to place and incurred some social capital that way. Sorry, social uncapital, whatever that word is. All right, they actually deployed this a number of places at Microsoft. So at Microsoft, they wanted to hire a lot of people from countries where the person did not yet have a visa. And so they would put them in Vancouver, which was much sort of open about immigration, and they would, quote, onboard them from there. So they would actually be in Redmond on the embodied social proxy in their group, and they would, go to meetings and learn stuff and have their heads down doing their work until they could get a visa and actually show up. So this was done a number of times there. And again, they only downside of this was the fact that somebody had to be there second to be able to move them from place to place when they wanted to. So you didn't have the autonomy. So now in the business world, there are a number of these telepresence robots built for offices and medical situations. Here's the double, which is basically an iPad on a Segway. So it's just a pole, and then there's wheels at the bottom, and there's a camera at the top. Sometimes they augment the iPad camera with something that's a bit more wider field of view. But then the person at home can move by just doing arrow keys to move from place to place. Our son has a company of about 20 people, and one of his software engineering managers actually lives in California, and the company is in Boulder. And when the guy was a software engineer doing his heads down, he could do just video conferencing and doing his own work, all right, to share the fruits of his labor. But when he became a manager, he knew he had to walk around. So our son, Sterling, bought a double, and then this guy was on this to be able to bump into people, to walk around, sort of say, so how's this going? Or here's a meeting that's going late. I know I can tell that it's going late, so I'll just hang out here until they're ready. So he turned out to really enjoy the fact that he was mobile. It was important for his job. So now some children are using the double in school. So there's a woman or a girl on the left, and then she is represented in this little discussion group on the right using the double robot. The other popular one for school is the Vigo. What's the first thing you notice about this one? It's short. It turns out the double has two different heights. It can be adult's height and then seated height. And so it's got some flexibility about how high it's going to be. And therefore, it can be an elementary school child or a high school child. So you imagine a high school child going down the street or on the hall in this one. Everybody's looking down, all right? And it turns out that matters. But this is the Vigo in the office situation. And here it's a very popular one for using for at least elementary school children going to school on the robot. This is one of our favorite characters, Lexi. That's not her real name. Often dresses in pink. She's been on the robot for about 4 years now. She started in kindergarten, and she dresses her robot also in pink. So you see the robot on the right is dressed. All right, so those are what the options are right now. But what I'd like to do is back up and say, all right, we've got a child who's got a chronic illness at home. What would we like to have for that child's development? So there are three things. We want academic learning for sure, so that they can, quote, stay in grade and stay with their classmates, especially if they are temporarily out of school. You want them to be able to smoothly get back into school when they're ready to go. You want to do social learning, and I'll unpack that in a minute. And then, of course, you want them to be happy. So what would it take for all of those? So for academic learning, they've got to be motivated to learn. That was the point I made about social facilitation. When you're in class and everybody's doing a particular workbook, you're going to do the workbook. And you say, hi, keep working on this until is everybody done yet? Can I look up? All of that social facilitation, if they're doing it, I'm going to do it. All right, you want to have the engaged exercises, and a lot of those are not just the workbooks. All right, they're going to have some experiment we're going to do, or we're going to go over here and see how the gerbil is doing, and you have to be mobile in order to be able to do that. So engaged exercises, little group discussions. We saw that one with the double, where she was in a group discussion, right? So in a high school group discussion. All right, they want to hear and see presentations. Some of these, it turns out, you want to be there in a language class, and not just for your hearing and speaking, but to hear how the other children are doing that as well. So you imitate what they are doing. And then checking in with learning and exercises and quizzes. These are some of the major things you do in academic learning. Oh, I have to mention what's in that picture. Can you see what's happening in that picture? So it's a little group experiment. I don't know, it's sand or something like that, and they're blowing with a straw, and the child on the Vigo also has a straw in his mouth. All right, so he's playing along, but he's part of this group doing the same exercise. All right, social learning. Excuse me. In school is where you learn to take turns. Probably doesn't happen in your family so much. It's in school where you're all equals, and we've got to figure out how to do this. So you're going to take turns, you're going to wait in line. Can you see the Vigo waiting in line? All right, just right there doing what everybody else is doing. You have to learn that everybody pitches in, and you have to learn that you have to help each other. and etc. There's all kinds of things you learn about how to behave in a social situation. And the third one is happiness. So there are allegedly 3 major components to happiness. One is autonomy, second is competence, and the third one is connectedness. So autonomy is independence. That's the not having to depend on somebody else to get you from place to place, right? You can drive where you want to go. Competence is having skills and using them. So I feel cool that I can actually get this robot to go around. I can go to choir practice. I can go to the book fair. And indeed, they even put them in the car and take them on a field trip, as long as there's Wi-Fi at the museum or wherever. You'll see a picture of this a bit later. Third one having to do with connectedness is your friends. All right, you build and have friends. Even the students who didn't ever go to school developed close friends, right, and got to see them every day and be with them. They're looking out for each other, etc. So having friends, people who care about you, not just your family, but your peers. So the comparison, pretty easy. Home tutor on the left-hand side, telepresent robots on the right. So the home tutor is 4 to 5 hours per week, and telepresent robot is all school days, all day. Low motivation to work. You got social facilitation. Got some academic learning, and then we've got a lot of academic learning because they're involved in everything. No social learning, some social learning, a lot of social learning, and then happiness is low and happiness is high. So the 2 pictures at the bottom, it's not bad having a tutor, but it's just not as full a rich experience as it could be if you were in school. All right, so let me tell you what we did. We have interviews of children on a Vigo. We have lots more sites now. People know that we are doing this, and so as soon as a school system says we're going to do some Vigos or doubles for our students, they call us up. So, because we can't just sort of advertise, tell us in the Los Angeles area if you are a child going to, there's not that many of them locally. And so we're looking nationwide for these. We have 6. We've also interviewed 5 parents, 14 teachers, 35 classmates in a focus group, and 8 administrators. It's important to include the administrators about how this is going to work in the school system. We also interviewed 2 teachers and 2 administrators who decided not to have the robot. And that's interesting about what the policy decisions were, why not to allow this, since it seems so cool. Then we've discovered that there's all kinds of newspaper articles about this, because if you've got a robot in your town like that, that's newsworthy. And so there are indeed 42 news articles, 43 so far, on Vigo and double in school systems. And some are permanently homebound, or just some are temporary. But having the news reporter talk about what the good and bad experiences are of the children doing this, mainly it's about empowerment, these newspaper articles. So we can't take this as just, same kind of data we would collect, because they're trying to make things good. Although they do talk about some other things. Sorry. It's not me, right? It's not me. Okay. All right. So we have 2 kinds of data. Our in-depth data on these 6 cases of children and the people around them, and then the 43 children who have stories that actually corroborate a lot of what we're finding in our interviews. All right, so there's several sets of findings I want to talk about. The first one is from the child's point of view, the sense of presence. They all talk about being in school, and they talk about being on the robot. I was just talking to Jack before this about why I use the word on as opposed to with a robot or by means of a robot. They talk about hopping on the robot and going to school. That is the vocabulary that says they are feeling in school and not at home. There will be interruptions at home, all right? Dog walks in, baby cries, something like that. But they say, oh, don't do that, I'm in school, all right? So they have a sense of presence there. The second level of presence has to do with psychological involvement, which is knowing the intentions of others, is my simple way of putting that. And so you see in the conversation to the right of those words, that one boy is talking to the other boy, all right, eye to eye. So they understand that he's coming towards me, I can talk to him, and he will talk back. So I understand what he's trying to do by where he's going. And then the third level is behavioral engagement, and that the actions are linked. So that's having a conversation, not just a simple reaction, but reaction back and forth. Conversations, we're all doing something together, we're going to blow on straws because the sand is here, and things like that. I love the picture on the lower right, because those kids all seem engaged with their friend on the Vigo. The one on the left, where they're walking in the hall, that's one of Vigo's representations on their homepage. They're so proud of the fact that kids are at school with these robots. All right, the students dress the robot. This is very common. We see this also at the CHI conferences and where they're going telepresence on a beam. They'll put t-shirts on them, they'll put hats from their home just to be able to distinguish one beam from the other. But at school, it's more about who am I? So Lexi is here on the left with her pink. There's a child in the middle that painted the robot to be the tiger stripes, and it's on a field trip with penguins. All right, so I'm glad there's good Wi-Fi there, but wherever they went, they got penguins here. Yeah, and then the child on the right is one of my favorite photos because he's wearing at home the same shirt that is at school. So you see the little red near his neck, and it almost continues to his shoulders. So the embodiment turns out to be part of his presence. Now, there's also a negative aspect to this. So one girl, I keep wanting to say women, but they're not, they're girls, that are in high school. She's on a Vigo in short, and there are a lot of people taller than her coming down the hall. And one guy says, "Oh, here comes the vacuum cleaner." Well, a 15-year-old girl is very sensitive to her self-presentation. I'm sorry, I've got my goosebumps up here. She never went on the robot again. She said, "I'll just go back to the other because I can't take this." And it was just this one student with that one sly comment, a kind of bullying. All right, the other thing is when they're at home and having treatment and when the teacher's going to show up and I have to get my homework done and things like that, it's not normal. And the mother or father has to come in periodically and get the kid to be doing stuff again, and we have to figure out the going to treatment and coming back. It's just not normal. And many of the students and the parents talk about how much they value normalcy when they're on the robot. Because the school starts at a particular time, it ends at a particular time, we know what to expect. You know, the child is engaged. It is that same child. She's undergoing cancer treatment and is a little bit wary about showing the fact that she has no hair. And some of the children will, instead of having their live face on there, will put a still picture of them because they're embarrassed to show most of them because they're bald. But she's brave. She's got a hat. Others put their hat on and say, "This is me, and I want to have the interaction with people. They have to look at my face." But I thought that was a nice pair. There is bullying, unfortunately. The most common is somebody will put a sign on their back that says, "Kick me." All right, the old standard stupid stuff. Indeed, at our son's office, the guy that was on the robot said that, yes, there's a sign on the back of me that says, "Kick me." He said, but this sort of makes me included. You know, they can goof around with me. But the same kind of thing is happening in the school. So there was a child who would go to lunch, right? So he would eat his lunch at home at the same time the kids are in the cafeteria. And one of the guys came by and put ketchup on his face, on the screen. He can't see that, right? Because his camera is up here. Other people can see it, but not him. So he goes back into the classroom, and the teacher says, "Oh, my goodness," and, you know, wipes the face off and sends him on his way. These things happen. Look at this cafeteria, how many kids are in there. You can't monitor everything that's happening in there, and this bullying happens here and there. And the teacher said, finally, he's getting the full deal right here. The whole shebang, the good and the bad, he's included. In the end, the kid had bodyguards. So two of his friends stepped up, and when he went to lunch, he'd make sure nobody put ketchup on his face or any other thing like that. They didn't have to schlep him around from place to place, but they'd look out for him. And that's part of the social learning that is going on. Yeah, and this teacher, sometimes the child's sitting in the class, and there's a child next to them, and the child will go over and just turn off the power. Or just put his hand up, to put the hand in front of the camera. And they just do that. And the teacher's reaction is says, well, you know, look at this boy in the bottom. They're just 10. And this is what they do. And they do to each other when they're face to face, and it's now happening to the kid. The kid is included. All right. All teachers talked about academic benefits about this thing because the kid is in class all day long, keeps up. I don't have to do anything special. I don't have to make the box of exercises. I don't have to do the IEP. The kid's in class. All I have to do is make sure that there's enough room as if it's a wheelchair. Make sure that the child can get around, you know, up and down stairs, have somebody carry them, things like that. So the teachers talked about academic benefits. All the children talked about being connected to their friends. So both things are going on. What's important to the child, certainly in elementary school, not thinking about, am I staying in grade? I mean, his future depends on some of that. But he's saying, can I be with my friends? There's Lexi again. All right, the second set of ideas had to do with a policy about this. So this affects the school system. So the policy is, where did the idea come from? And in our sample, some came from the teachers saying, I know of this kid, how can we get this kid back in class? And they found out about the robots. Sometimes it were parents who'd been reading up and said, oh, I want to look out for my kid, there's this robot. And sometimes it's school administrators looking for opportunities to bring children back into school. So it was about evenly split on that, at least in our small sample. Clearly, all three are the stakeholders. You can't have the teacher and the school say, we're going to put this in your home, and the parents say, what? All right, the teachers and the parents and the children all have to be on board. It turned out the teachers turned out to be nervous because there's going to be this high-tech thing in my classroom, and a kid is on it, and I care about the kid. What if I break it? Or am I responsible for the network connection? Or if we go to another class, can we actually do that? So they were nervous about it, which says there should be some training to the teachers about what is your responsibility, who's going to help, who'll pay for it, all those kinds of things. And then, of course, the school board has to approve this. And this is a very new thing for a school board to think about. So one of the teachers who wanted to have this happen got on a robot and went to the school board meeting and interacted, looked left and right and talked and agreed and all these kinds of things. And then it said at the end, so can we have the kid do this? And they went, Well, it seemed to work. And then what they did is send her to the back of the room and say, can you hear us now? And can you see what I just wrote on the board? So it was an eye and ear test about whether this is really going to be technically sufficient for the classroom. And it was, and she got the robot. But I thought that was very clever to give them the whole experience like that. All right, some of the school boards, two of them, turned it down. And the reason they turned it down is they knew the family. And in both cases, the mother, who would be most present when the child was there, was very active on Facebook and often would say negative things about how things were handled in the classroom. So it's privacy. The privacy issue goes both ways. Do I have that next? Oh, I'll talk about that in a second. All right, so because of those privacy reasons about what was going to happen in the classroom, they said no, and therefore denied the child the opportunity to be in school for this. All right, so privacy concerns, they go both ways. The picture at the top is the child in school, and who else is in the school? Mom, right over her shoulder, being friendly in this case. But the child's on a tablet in the living room, and it's easy to then have people come by and say, oh, hello. And yet they're in a classroom that has its own strict procedure and expectations and things like that. So people other than the child can be in the classroom. People in the classroom can see into the home. So if the living room where the child is not very tidy, then there are people going to make inferences about what the home life is like, or if the dogs come by and the children cry and things like that. So what we think the solution to this is to train the parents to be classroom aides. Because if you're literally in the classroom, there are expectations about what you can and cannot do with the children and what you can talk about outside, and certainly on Facebook. All right, so they're given an actual role. This has happened already. And then the other is to set up the workstation in the study or a private area. We're even talking about putting a sheet behind them or something very neutral. So you're not seeing the kid in the home. They actually look like they're in the classroom. So, and some of them are on iPads. Well, they often hold the iPad down here. So what face do you project if it's held down here? Up your nostrils, right? Not so good. It should be up here, and it should be life size. Right? You want to fill the whole screen. One of the problems with the Vigo is that the screen is very tiny. It's like this, right? And so it's very hard to get your whole face in there so people can see what you're looking at or what your expression is. It's easier on the iPad, but we also want to have the children have good access, so a large laptop with a large screen, because they're looking at a lot of stuff. Or we had in one case a child who had the robot on one screen, bigger screen, and other things on the other screen, so he could go to computer class or something like that. So there are different configurations for the home, I think, that would be important. There's Lexi. See, she's getting older. All right. The other set of findings have to do with what the robot looks like, how it's made. So robots were made for workplaces, and the question is, what should it have to be in school? I've intimated at some of these already. All right, size and weight. So there's elementary school children on the left, and there's a high school student on the right. There's the Vigo and the double. And I put little arrows on the double because the arrows can be several different heights, not just fixed. You can make yourself the height you want to. There's the beam, and then there's the RP7 that's used in the medical world. Very successful in the medical world for remote physicians. I'll tell you about that at the end. So it turns out they're not using the beam or the RP7 in schools. Why not? It'd kill a kid. It's too big. If that thing fell over, right, that'd be a disaster. But both the Vigo and the double are quite light. All right, so then we ought to look at all of the features that the robot had. We struggled with this for quite a while about how to get our handles on it. And what we said was, what I wanted to come up with is to be able to tell a developer, so what should the video be? What should the audio be? What should the navigation be? But we were confused about that because video matters in a lot of situations. So we finally decided to do an analysis where we looked first at the learner in school, so that's the aspects of the robot, and we look at all the tasks of the learner in school. Second is, what does a teacher need to do with the robot? For example, turn it on and off. All right. Classmates, what do they need to do to be able to help it along? And then what is it like to be the child at home? What is the user interface to it? So the first one's the robot. The second one's the user interface at home. So we went through a lot of scenarios with that. And I'm going to give you a few hints about what the final solutions were. The biggest one was connectivity. So it's going down the hall, and it's going between Wi-Fi areas, and it stops. Right? It's gone. So the child, nothing. So it turns out Wi-Fi connectivity throughout the schools, they are spotty in schools, especially in halls or gymnasiums or in auditoriums, things like that. So if it doesn't go, it doesn't work. So we're recommending they have better Wi-Fi connectivity, and then actually recommend putting hotspots on it. So it's using the phone network as opposed to Wi-Fi. And that would be an addition and some cost, of course, but if you don't have connectivity, you don't have anything. The second one was battery life for school. Vigo has a 6-hour or a 12-hour. The 12-hour is, of course, more expensive and heavier. But they say it's 6 hours, but if you're actually moving for 6 hours, or for all that time, you're going to get 3 hours. So the moving chews up more battery life than actually just being on the top. So it turns out, the battery life matters a great deal for staying in school. The other thing you can do, and some schools do this, is put the docking station where you get repowered at the desk. So when he or she is at their desk, they're getting repowered to take them through the rest of the day. All right, attending classes. It turns out that the Vigo, when it drops connectivity and then adds connectivity, will say, Samuel has entered the room. Well, unfortunately, Samuel was still in the room and the connectivity went off and then on again. So if this happens 3 times, this is no longer funny. The first time it is funny. So there has to be something to either, occupancy should be signaled by a little light on the top, certainly not an announcement like that. Second one is personalization. They actually take a hanger and hang it from the camera. Wasn't built for a hanger, especially some of them put on big Halloween costumes and all kinds of things hanging on there. Sometimes they duct tape it to the back. There's got to be some way to dress it for school and maybe even for work, right? To identify who is who or this is a real person. And the third one is raising a hand. So we saw that girl in one photo earlier raising her hand by putting her hand in front of her face. Right? That works. A little light would work. Pebbles actually had a little hand that went up. Right? I don't see the Vigo or the double coming with a little hand that can go up. But there has to be some way to get the teacher's attention. Changing height. I've already mentioned this about sitting versus standing for the double. But you'll see in the right-hand picture, this is what happens socially when somebody is short. Right? The reporter is kneeling down to talk to the person. All right, if it's short, we're going to do this. In fact, I have pictures of the Vigo in high school, and all the kids walking down the hall are going like this. All right, so we accommodate to that. So it turns out to be very important to accommodate to the height, especially for high school. And it's important for the sound to come from near the mouth. If the sound comes from the base where it's easy to put it, all right, then you're talking one-on-one, intimately with this person, and you go, what? All right, their voice is coming from down there. It's very inappropriate. They all have the camera near the face, so that's okay. You can make eye contact. And many teachers, especially with elementary school children, say, I have to get their attention and make eye contact. And so they do this to the child, and the child can see the teacher's face right there, and they get their attention. So that works well. All right, the teachers have difficulty with being flexible, handing out assignments. So there's one case where the teacher wanted to give the student a quiz. Everybody's going to take a quiz. And the kid's going, well, how am I going to do this? And so it turns out that they put earphones on the little kids, on the robot, so that the student next to him could read him the question. He would then respond with the answer over the earphones, and they would write it down. So he had a surrogate. All right, there's got to be some other way. In some cases, what we're talking about is just the home station and the classroom being fitted with a scanner and printer at both ends. All right, so the thing can go in there, comes out the printer, child fills it out and just sends it back. Not as part of the robot, but just part of the school setting. The other one is that, there are many more than this, but I'm just getting the highlights. The student at home, it turns out that walking and talking is hard. So you're going down the hall, you're having a conversation with these people who are looking down at you, so you're doing this, and you've got your hands on the arrow keys, and you're trying to not bump into things like that. That turns out to be cognitively difficult. And they will often they will listen to everybody else, but not talk. And so they're not actually part of the conversation. Some of the RP7s, the big robot there, have partnered with Roomba, the little vacuum cleaner, right, to actually navigate for them. So you say, I want to go to the gym, and it'll take it off to the gym, being sensitive to what's around them, because it has to do with the sensors as well. So automatic navigation, that's going to be expensive, and we're going to have to think about the cost benefit of these things getting built and who pays for all of this stuff. All right, as I just said, those were the people-oriented tasks. Now we want to actually organize all of this stuff so that the developer knows what should we do about connectivity, what should we do about audio, what do you do about video, etc. So we want to make it in that form as well. And so we've developed some tables that show what we think the ideal features are. And this is David Kahn, the CEO of Double. And he is, one moment, please. So they're in the Bay Area. There's his Double robot. They've sold over 8,000 of these things so far. Many in classrooms. Vigo's sold a lot in the classrooms, but I told you there's 4.5 million kids out there that could benefit by that. So there's an opportunity for him, it's a big market, to actually do this so it works for these kids. Now, the real issue is the cost-benefit analysis. So our next step with him is to come with our wish list. Which of these audio things can we get? Which of these video things can we get? This one already has 2 different heights, so that's good on that. It's got the camera at the top. So we're going to do the checklist of what we want, what they have, how much is it going to cost you to develop, how much does it cost you to build? Because some of these are just devices you can hang on there. It's going to cost another 30 bucks, and et cetera. So this is an interesting exercise for somebody in HCI to do, is to figure out then, he can figure out the costs, both to develop and to sell, but I have to figure out the benefit. So what is the benefit of social learning? What is the benefit? So we're going to do our best about putting high, medium, and low priority on these. If you've got this level of video, then this would be a little better in these situations, but that doesn't happen so often. You know, think of that as the challenge for you of which of these things are really important and which ones are not. But that's the stage we're in. And I think the idea about what is going to cost for the developer to develop something, piece of software, and then what it's going to cost to deliver it. If it's a piece of software, it will cost. You have to recoup some of that cost, but then it's not going to cost that much to the end user. And we're trying to keep the cost down for schools. Oh, that's Veronica on the robot there. All right, so that's where we are on the K through 12 children. Thinking about building, you're going to school on a robot. but this application has other places it could be used. Certainly in college, which is why Veronica got the school gift to buy some robots for kids, for students in college. There are college mobility issues. We have a lot of students on our campus, it being good weather campus, that are on the wheelchairs, automatic wheelchairs, right? And so they can go outside, and we have very good ADA accessibility on our campus. But there are some things they can't do, or they can't get from one class to the other fast enough. There's an opportunity to have them go on those classes on a robot. There are people who are incarcerated who have the capability and the motivation to go to school but cannot get out of the building they are in. They could go to school on the robot. The question is, what other security issues? In fact, Edward Snowden has been on one of these back in the US, and we say, well, what are the laws about that? About him not being able to come back. What does it mean to come back? Yes. K through 12, it would be nice if some schools had these just, if you need one for the next 2 weeks, you can hop on the robot. We'll teach you how to do it, give you a map of the class, and you can go on. Because you don't need anything special except the robot, because class is class. And then Veronica was also working in Montana, also realized that in Montana there are a number of Native Americans who, to travel to school, would be extraordinarily long distance. And it turns out most of the Native Americans who then go to college never go back to the reservation. Right? So what she would like to do is help them do long distance education to the University of Montana, so they never leave their reservation, but they get the education and bring it back to their organizations. But then this is an actual class, the University of Montana. How many humans are in it? Maybe 3 or 4, and then the rest are robots. Some are taller than others. I thought it was interesting. Somebody's dominant. Maybe somebody's speaking at that particular moment. All right, where else do we see these telepresence robots? Well, I, about 5 years ago, was doing a lot of work about telepresence in medicine. That's the early RP7 on the right-hand side. And in medicine, to be mobile is very important. So you can actually follow your patient from the ER to the admitting. And so it's you giving the instructions to the nursing staff, for example, what the needs are. You don't lose that communication. There are, I know about this place in Upper Michigan that has an RP7 for stroke analysis. It turns out if you have a stroke, then if it is a stroke, you need medication within the first hour. All right? Otherwise it's lost. But if you get the medication and you didn't have a stroke, that's bad. So you need some expert who can diagnose whether a stroke has just happened. So they have these RP7s in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, it's very remote, so that they can do this kind of stroke diagnosis. Once they have them there, they say, what else could we use these for? Who else can? And they say, hop on the computer, or hop on the robot. And so they have actually psychiatric sessions there. They have neurologists there, all right, just for various periods of time, getting the high-end specialties out to the remote areas, which I think is great. And locally, the CHOC is Children's Hospital of Orange County, which is near us. There are pediatricians at CHOC who are specialists in various kinds of pediatrics. And if a child comes into the UCI hospital with a particular ailment, you want to have the specialists. So actually there are robots there that the CHOC physicians can get on. Because, though it's not long distance, it's all Orange County, it's LA. All right, and so it could be a half an hour to get from one place to the other, even though it's like 20 miles. So traffic is an issue. Also on the right-hand side, here's a picture of the doctor on the user interface. And the doctor has not only the view of the patient, but also medical record stuff. So he can go back and forth between those to look. On the right is what it looks like in the patient's room. Here's a diagnosis with a pediatrician. I was really interested in the sociality of these robots, how they are accepted by the patients and the families. And so I would go to the conference every year in the cocktail party. It's a great place to collect data. And talk to people about, do you have a robot? How does it work? What has happened with your robot? And they tell me stories. And I have some lovely stories about this robot and how it was accepted by families. So in one case, an elderly patient had all of her family around and the doctor on the robot, and the patient died, and the family gathered the robot into the circle. I can't do that without crying, sorry. There's another case, this one's better. where a pediatrician was on the robot, and a child is there, 10-year-old says, I don't think you're really in there. I like that, in there, right? I don't think you're really in there. So he says, turn to the left, and he turns to the left. He says, turn to the right, turn to the right. Turn around, and does all that. He says, okay, I think you're in there. Can I touch you? And he reaches his hand out then, and at that moment, the pediatrician's monitor comes down and goes, booga, booga, booga. So it was just a moment of being together. You know, he understood what a 10-year-old wanted to do. So that's the end. It's short, but I have 2 ending slides here. This is what program? Modern Family. And what's in it? A double. Yep. He was part of several shows. And the other day, I just typed in telepresence robot, and you can shop. All right, there's all these kinds of robots available. But now that you've heard what I've talked about, if you want to do a telepresence robot, you can figure out which features you need. And one of the interesting, you can't see it too well, but the double and the RP7 and all of them are up there. Oh, but not, oh, there it is. Upper row, second from the right is the kubi. Kubi is, I think, Japanese for neck. And so this is a little platform like this with a neck and a grappling thing that holds your iPad. And then you just do video conferencing to where you're going to go, but you can now control the camera up and down, left and right. You can be part of the group. So if you don't need the mobility, that's a good solution. It's not very expensive either. So Veronica and I bought 2 of these because I was not able to travel to Korea for Kai. So Gary took them in his suitcase. He was my agent, set them all up in a meeting about telepresence robots. All right, there's a time zone issue there that we were up really late that night, and it was mid-afternoon or something in Korea. But anyway, so we're both on the robots, and a tech guy who's always been helping all the conference comes by and says, hi, Gary, is Judy going to be here? And then Judy says, hi, Scooter, and he just freaked out, not being familiar with the fact that this thing can move around. So Veronica and I spent about 2 hours on those, and it petered out. There were lots of issues about where we should be positioned in a group because it was a workshop that then broke into little groups, and it was hard to figure out. But there were also funny jokes about Gina Vanolia, who was in that first thing about embodied social presence. She came by and said, yeah, Judy, that's just like being here. It didn't work that well. Anyway, thank you very much. Feel free to contact me if you have other questions after this session today, but I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
So we do have time for questions, and if you have some, I will bring this microphone to you, or Jocelyn Pena also has a microphone. So raise your hand or do it on your monitor. I'll come to you
Wait,
now.
she's coming.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the presentation. I was kind of thinking using this in my situation, and I was thinking what I really need is that I go to my advisor room and knock the door. How can I do that?
That's happened. So a child was late to his physics class in high school, and the door was closed, and they have no arms. So he backed up and hit the accelerator as far as he could, and he banged into the door. No response. Backed up, banged into it again. Somebody, what? And opened the door. In that case, yeah, you want to say, I'll show up at 4, can you open your door for me? But that is a disability. Good. Do try them. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the talk. It's very...
There you are. Good.
It's very impressive to hear the story when you shared how students feel connected by giving more personal flavors on their telepresence robot, like wearing clothes or showing more individual characteristics. I wonder, like we have this theory of uncanny valley when we create or support this kind of robot technologies. How do kids or K-12 children make sense of this kind of gap when they try to make sense of the robot as a real man or a real person, or it is just a robot with more some human-like characteristics?
Right.
Thank you.
Children actually react to these quite well. You know, they've been born digital. all kinds of weird digital things happening around them, they're more accepting immediately than adults. And adults are like, whoa, what is this? And children just walk up and say, how does this work? We take them to fairs often just to introduce children to them, and they react to them very well. But I think you were talking about two different things. There's the telepresence robot, which is a human being, and then a robot who has human-like characteristics, like the Now. I think the literature shows that the closer the real robot is to humans, the creepier it is. So it's actually called the creepiness factor. In fact, a couple of years ago, there was a animation of a human. It looked like a human being on the screen, a woman who was talking, and she was very animated, and all her gestures were right. And then she burned down, and it was horrifying to a lot of people, me included, because she was so close to being a human, right? But you kept watching for her, but that wasn't quite right. So you have to get it perfect before people assume it's a human. Right, so I think having it non-human, but having some helpful characteristics, the child or the person has to give a mental model about what this thing can do. But it can do things that are friendly to make it a more social situation. It's a tough problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I have questions. Thank you for your talk. You have like two settings. Like the first one that I saw is like one classroom have just like one robot, and another classroom have like a lot of robot inside. Do you see what difference between two settings?
Oh yeah, a lot of difference. So the robots don't have much peripheral vision. The robots don't have much peripheral vision. Mm-hmm. Right, so if you're sitting next to each other, you may not be aware of what this robot is doing. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of awkwardness about who's going to talk next. They have to get a social protocol about that. You actually know a lot about what's happening around you, so you can, if you're, the greatest social experiment is to walk down the hall and watch how people are getting around you, even though they're doing this, all right? That we have a lot of sense about where we are and where we're going to go, and that people are much better at that than the robots. So I think that you have to get more explicit protocols when you've got 5, 6 robots in the room.
Yeah, and another question about a doctor setting. Does the patient and their family trust the robot doctors? Do you
Yes.
have any like trustness problem for the?
All I have is the company itself has data on whether the patient would prefer their home doctor on a robot or a local doctor human, and they prefer the home doctor. And you can imagine that's because they have history. And the new doctor would have to learn all kinds of things about you to react appropriately. So yeah, they have that data anyway. Trust. So you wouldn't trust the remote doctor. I mean, the remote doctor can't do as many things, but I think the trust has to do with the history. Okay, thank you. Whoever gets the mic first. And there's one down here. Oh, there you go. Good social facilitation, you guys. All right, here and then there. Go ahead, down here. Down here and then up there. Yeah. So what we've got is the iPad on a stick and a wheels at the bottom, and it can move the whole body, right? So they're much grosser gestures that the remote person has, and I think the local people notice that it's more awkward. Is that the kind of thing you're looking for?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's harder because it's a flat screen to say where the person's looking. And teachers really want to know what you're looking at to infer where your attention is. If you're doing this, that means something than if you're doing that. And that's a little harder to do on there. So that's just 2. Okay, good. Up here?
Hi.
Who's the mic?
Thank you for your presentation. It's very interesting for me. And I have a question about the privacy issue. So when you were doing this study, do you need to get the conforms from all classmates in that class?
No. This is hard. I'm sure different IRBs would judge differently on this, but we did not do any interventions. The robot is just there, right? So that the school board might want to have the approval of everybody else and the parents of the children, but we didn't have to get it because it's not we are not doing anything except talking to people. But that's an interesting open issue for the administrators. Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah,
My question is about just the long-term effects of using telepresence, especially for children. So did you notice any decreasing levels of engagement, especially because of the prolonged exposure? Like if you're saying like 40 hours in a week, you probably can do that or handle that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And meetings are different. You're there for 2 hours or 3 hours.
Right.
And especially because the target population is K-12 children.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, there's a story I forgot to tell that might answer this. That there's a child with a heart deficiency whose energy was decreasing and decreasing. The mother was offered the robot, and the mother thought that he couldn't do it because of his energy level given to his disease. He was given the robot, and the first day he was on for 5 hours. Has been on ever since. He's still got his condition, but he's in school on the robot. And he also tried out for the choir and made it. So there's a robot in choir. So I don't think it dissipates over time. Alexi's been on it for 4 years. You saw her from kindergarten to 4th grade in there, still wearing pink. So I think they value so much the connectivity, and even some of them who have never been in school develop lifelong friends. Well, I don't know whether it's lifelong yet, but good friends. Is there another? Yeah, behind you.
Hi, my name is Dong Chen. It's actually quite interesting and amazing to think just by adding a physical movement capability to an iPad makes such a difference for social interaction.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what are the next steps? What other modalities or interaction approaches can be added to the system?
Yeah.
Something on top of my mind might be like adding emoji, like making human emotion more expressible by making a big emotion icon on the screen, or maybe adding arms to the robot. I don't know. What's in your mind?
I do the arms. I wouldn't do anything fake to the face. I think the face is really critical. But arms, all right, they're frustrated that they can't hit the elevator button. They can't raise their arm. They can't knock on the door. If they could, the next one would be touch, right? Especially for young children, to be able to touch various things in the classroom. But that's going to be a while. Or maybe not. There's all kinds of stuff happening in laboratories. If we could just get those, coalesced onto the same robot, that'd be great. Which is why Veronica spends a lot of time getting the message out. And she's good at it. Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
Ben Hanrahan. So you had a great quote from the teacher that the student was getting the good and the bad. What
Yeah.
about the teacher from the student? Like, are they fidgeting with the robot? Are they misbehaving in some interesting way with the robot?
Good question. I don't have any stories of that, but we have a somewhat small sample. And I haven't seen anything in the newspaper stories about that. But I can imagine that a child who's bored with what's going on has the ability to tune out, and maybe in hidden ways. They can't see the child's arms. Okay, that's why they want to see their eyes. But that's a good point about how they misbehave remotely. Yeah, I'll talk to Veronica, see if we have any stories like that. There's one there and one there. And one there? Mary Beth.
What about the conversational characteristics, right? So you started with the tutor. It's pretty clear what kind of conversation you would expect there. Someone is tutoring, guiding, and whatever. Now you've got all different kinds of conversational possibilities.
Right.
And yet it's not, you don't have the body awareness. There's just a lot of stuff that you can't have because you're behind a camera. What do you notice about how you can start conversations or respond to conversations or carry on different kinds of conversations. Do you have any observations about that?
We do in small bits. That's a really good question of the things we could look for in the future about the kinds of conversations that happen and don't happen. The one thing we noticed was that it is, what is it, mono audio. So when a voice comes, I don't know where it's coming from. And if it's coming from behind or left, I don't know left or right. And so I have to do all of this stuff and I look very confused. So stereo audio, I think, in the younger grades would be very important. Yeah. So there's awkwardness, and so maybe they don't respond to a comment behind them. But it'd be interesting to do the turn taking and actually how long a conversation is and things like that. Right, initiate. Yeah. Yeah.
And so my question is, I see definitely.
Can you hold the mic close? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So I see the connectivity in happening in the classroom, like a school environment, and so they can make friends and they can learn things from the teacher. But I'm wondering if you have looked at how that connectivity actually expand to their real life. So if they make friends, they actually have try to meet, arrange the meeting outside or their home, or the student actually try to ask a question about the clarity about what they learned from the class setting. After a while, they send an email or those kind of expansion from the
Right.
setting to outside or.
We don't have data on that yet, but that's again another good question. We have cases where children were gone from school for like a month and then came back, and they all reported it was just like he was here the whole time. So that was a good, from inside to outside. But we don't know about going to their friends' houses or things like that yet. That would take much more longitudinal study. Good question. Yeah.
So my question is kind of legal question. If my robot presents somewhere, can I say that I legally present at that location? And another question is that, what if my robot hurt someone? Am I responsible for that?
I can't answer either of those questions. Those are iRobot type questions. Yeah, right. Those are ethical questions, things about what society hasn't answered those yet. I mean, we have a lot of those kinds of questions with the self-driving car about who's responsible or how does it make a decision between hurting two different people. Yeah. Sorry, good question. I'm glad I'm getting you to think about these things. Yeah.
So you mentioned some of the kids kind of develop a kind of relationship with the robot decorated to represent and so forth. But the robot is physically in the school. So how did they make that happen?
Wait, I didn't hear the first part.
So some of the kids decorated the robot,
Yes.
But the robot is
In school.
right. So
Right.
how
So-
did they make that happen?
Yeah, Lexi sent a bag with her mother to the school and said, can you give this to the teacher to put on the robot? And sometimes the teachers initiate whether to make it more like a kid as opposed to a pole. They'll initiate, Fred, what would you like us to put on the robot? So it's a negotiation. That's an interesting negotiation about how do I want to be presented in school. Yeah. Yeah.
Picture of a circle of students interacting with the robot. It makes me feel like if I am the disabled kids, I feel like I am popular among the kids. And so that sense of popularity is that, so some of them is coming from the curiosity of the technology, of the novelty. So when later I present myself
I'm no
in
longer
front of,
interesting.
right,
Because I'm
right.
not on the robot.
How do you I guess
That's good. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just you. Yeah.
nothing special.
Yeah. I don't know how to answer the question. We haven't seen that happen. We have had kids be in school, go away, and come back, and people are delighted to see them in real. There's other cases we had kids finally get back to school and say, "Oh, you're a lot taller," because the robot's only down here. But yeah, that's a good point about attribution of popularity to the robot versus the real human being? Yeah, good question. You guys are coming up with really good questions. We got any more?
Any other questions?
Oh.
We've got some.
Got 2 more here.
There's one down here first.
Thank you. My question is this. Do you think this could revolutionize not only child learning, but college learning for online learning? Do you think this would be a better platform for online learning at a collegiate level?
Well, yeah, we're buying robots for UCI, for students who can't get there. Revolutionize. I think it makes people stay engaged longer, and so as opposed to students dropping out because they can't keep up. That would be good. I'm not sure revolutionizing. It could be that you do an online class and then you meet by robot together, or some people are local and you're not, so you hop on the robot. I'm not sure in that case whether the mobility is important. So you could just be a Kubi or a video conferencing by that point. So it depends, you know, if you're just learning something or meeting one, I don't know. You have to ask your questions, which are the features we need for this situation? Yeah, good. Good point. There was another one down here. Oh, good. Hello again.
Thank you very much for a really interesting presentation.
Thank you.
I am fascinated by these robots, but I also see them as expensive and delicate. How would they be affordable to a low-income school? How would they be made more robust to be used in a variety of different school environments?
Yep.
And is there a way to jerry-rig, MacGyver a series of technologies that already exist that have a much lower price point that any school could put together to make this happen without having to buy a robot?
So the cheapest would be to get an iPad and have somebody carry it around. To get an iPad and have somebody carry it around. So our daughter is a middle school teacher of robotics and engineering, middle school, and it's a lower income place, and the students are now tasked with how can we make this for us. So I think that's one way to go, is to get some good ideas from that. Because there are a lot of toys and stuff that have wheels. But I worry then about the robustness of it. You're right, those are the trade-offs. And that's why we're having this conversation with David Kahn about the cost of some of these things. Because our concern is to make sure that everybody has access to it, that there's and these are not that expensive. It's with the iPad, the double is $2,000. Vigos are $8,000, and that's going to be price point out. Both are pretty robust, though I'm sure somebody could pick up a double and purposely break it. You know, break it over their knee, stuff like that. But yeah, those are issues. I totally agree. Any
Hi,
more?
my name is Rama.
Yeah.
Thank you for the good presentation. My question was that a lot of schools now are moving towards maker spaces or project-based learning, and they're doing it like the philosophy is that learn by doing.
Yep.
So did you try telepresence robots in those settings, and what the people who are participating in using those robots, were they frustrated when they could not do it physically, or how did you manage?
Well, the only parallel we have is doing these exercises in classes that like blowing on the sand. Right, it turned out we could have set that up so the kid at home had the straw and the sand, right? And if it required 2 or 3 people to do something, he's out. But if he could experience something by having a mini version in his room, so the maker spaces, as long as they have the equipment, and the good thing about maker spaces, I look at you and I say, I didn't know you could do that. That's a good idea. So that social learning of what you can actually make would probably be helpful there. We haven't tried it.
In the sand experiment, was the presence lowered when the kid could not do it physically?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
In the sand experiment, which you were talking about,
Yes.
the blowing, was the presence lowered when the kid could not do the experiment, the kid who was doing telepresence communication?
I think actually yes, but he was having so much fun blowing on the straw that he just thought this was fun. He was participating. You know, he wasn't doing the reflection about, am I learning everything I could learn here? Yeah, because they're
Thank you.
kids.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, great.
I think that's it. And of course, we cannot let you leave without an expression of gratitude.
Oh, lovely.
So
Thank you very
please
much.
take this
Thank you.
and please join me in thanking Dr. Olson
Thank
one
you.
more time.
Thank you. Thank you. Good questions.
Yeah, thanks for coming,
Yeah,
everyone.
they're good
Great
questions. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
Signal you, but you wouldn't come down.
It's always hard to know.